We have 4 of our 5 members, so good. Dan is muzzled, so I guess that's good. Do we have any public comment?
Nothing's been submitted.
Okay, thank you. So we'll just move on. Changes to the agenda. Right after minutes approval, I'm going to have Jason and Amy give their report because they have someplace they have to be at 2:30. And in case we have any questions for them or their reports extend over time, we'll hear them first. So we have minutes approval for our last meeting. Would somebody like to move that? Amanda moves, Dave seconds. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, are we ready to vote? Looks like it. So, Dan Klein.
Yes.
Amanda Champion.
Yes.
Dave McKenna.
Yep.
It looks like Anna's not here yet. So
I'm here. I've been here since the beginning. I just didn't show up.
You've been hiding.
I have been hiding. I've been like waving my hands since the beginning.
All right, Anna, how do you vote on the minutes?
I vote in support of them.
And I vote yes, so that's unanimous. Thank you, everybody. And now we will hear from Jason and Amy.
I don't want to disappoint, but I don't think we have a very extensive report. I know, I don't know if you made it to F&I, but Arel gave yes, you were at F&I, you saw it.
Yeah, I think most of us were.
Yeah, Arel gave kind of an overview of where we are, kind of in a grant application phase now for Flex Tech funding, which I suspect we'll get, and we'll be able to move forward early next year with kind of the beginning of the building envelope analysis and building analysis. So I think that's really all right now. I know Scott's got a good report to give on the fleet, which I know we're excited to hear about. But I don't know that I have anything specific. Amy, do you have anything specific? Good.
I don't. Trying to find that unmute button still difficult, but no, I don't have anything else to add.
You'd think we'd be getting good at this, but it still takes me forever. Does anybody have questions for Jason or Amy? Well, let's see. I do. So we've all heard the news now that we're losing a couple of our stalwart members of the DPS. And I was wondering, since we've given them so much more to do, how quickly those searches are going to get launched and how quickly we're going to move forward on the sustainability officer.
It's probably safe to say the recruitment won't start till the beginning of next year. Recruiting right now is tough at the holiday season. We never really get a good return when we do it now. So Katie and I haven't really talked in depth about it, but probably in the beginning of the year we'll start with the recruitment schedule for them and go from there.
Well, thanks. That sounds like a good plan.
Yeah, it just between Thanksgiving and Christmas, you don't get a lot.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else have any questions?
No.
Okay. Seeing none, we will move on to the chair's report.
Deborah?
Oh yeah, Martha. I'm sorry.
I was sorry. I was slow on my blue hand. How about developing the job description for the Chief Sustainability Officer? Can that move ahead so that we're ready?
We're working on that right now.
Okay.
We'll circulate a draft of something in the next week or two.
Sounds good. Thank you.
That's great. All right. Anybody else? Blue hands or regular hands before I move on? All right. So I guess a big piece of my report is going to be on the Public Service Commission's rate case determination, which finally came out on the 19th. The good news is that the rate increase request was cut substantially. In the electric case for NYSEG, it's going to be actually about 2% a year, which will be more than 6%, given what the mortgage industry refers to as the miracle of compound interest, but still considerably lower than the 24% that the utility had asked for. So that's very good news. I have some detail on the rate case that anybody who's interested, I will be happy to forward the documents that I received from Irene and Brian Eden. I guess the significant thing is that these cuts in the rate increases aren't permanent. I think all they've done is put off for 3 years because of the pandemic and the economic results of the pandemic, the increases that were initially requested, because that additional money is probably going to be needed at some point, especially by NYSEG for vegetation management and grid upgrades. Let's see, Irene and I spoke about this last night. The rate case as approved still allows an 8.8% return on investment to the NYSEG investors, which seems a bit over the top given how badly the rest of the economy is doing. However, Irene says there's reason to be optimistic because the PSC still has this larger umbrella thing that it's doing to deal with all of the utilities in the state. And she opined that it's possible that what the PSC will do is impose limits on return on investment and rate increases that will apply across the board to all of the public utilities in the state, which seems fair. And, I hope she's right. And I guess the other positive piece of this rate case is the gas piece actually reflects a larger statewide commitment to non-pipe alternatives and pushing heat pumps instead of, natural gas as a bridge fuel and more efficient use of natural gas, all of which is a good thing, and all of which is to some extent, at least, due to the grassroots efforts that have come out of Tompkins County. And among the people responsible for that are Irene and Martha and several others, and I congratulate them on the influence that they've had. So other than that, I would report on Arel's F&I report, which I found really exciting, except that almost all of you were there. So I don't need to repeat his good work. And I think that's probably everything for me. I'll tell you what. Let's hear from Amanda now about, okay, I'll get to you, Anna. Let's hear from Amanda after Anna's question, and she can fill us in on what's going on with the WRC. But Anna, you go first.
A couple things. I wasn't able to attend that meeting you all are talking about, so I'll watch it. But if there's a brief summary, that would be great. And the other question I had was for Irene or Deb, but my understanding from reading all the updates on the listservs is this is a win. It is a delay. The way that it's described, I just one follow-up question. Did they create a delayed but guaranteed step up to the 25%, or is it delayed and then renegotiation? Is it delayed and there'll be a step up but not to the full 25%? And sorry for the little puppy noises, but that I'm
Oh no, they're adorable.
Okay. Yeah, well, I'm happy to share, especially if you want to help me get a full night's sleep.
No, that's okay. I'm not sure because I haven't read the case itself. I don't think that the increases that were delayed are necessarily set in stone.
So,
Irene's here,
yeah,
so let's let her talk because she is the maven of all things NICEAG rate case.
so what's happened is the charges for the tree trimming were amortized. I forget. I think they were to be amortized over 5 years and now they're 10. So we'll be paying for it for a longer period of time. There's no, that 25% is gone. What happens is at the next rate case, there's, all the stuff that we're still paying for, plus the new stuff that they say we need, and us pushing back and negotiations and whatever, and then it'll be whatever the new price tag is.
Was there
So
any recognition of the fact that NICEAG took our money and didn't use it to pay for the maintenance, but rather kept it for profit?
I don't understand. Took our money and.
So there was a rate increase, the last rate increase, there was acknowledgement at that time that they had trimming to do, and they had, and they prolonged and put off all of the hedging and trimming of all the trees to basically zero and pushed forward. So just trying to understand.
Yeah, that's not accurate. They did do trimming.
Just not as much as.
Exactly.
There's been a lot of shenanigans over many years, and with the tree trimming.
I'm referring to just those shenanigans.
Yeah, but it's not as easily clear cut as just that they took our money and didn't do anything. They took our money and did stuff that was substandard or, not up to snuff. And, whoever did the work still had to get paid. We did push back within this rate case. I'm not allowed to talk about the specifics of how we pushed back and what we did or didn't win. I'm only allowed to talk about what you see in the JP and in our comments. And in our comments, we did talk about that we thought that there should be more. I don't think we quite used the word restitution to ratepayers, but that there needed to be more accountability. And what we had pushed for or asked for and didn't get is that the 17, I think it was 17 million a year for some new component, that they should be paying for that and not us paying for that.
That's what I wanted to understand.
Yeah, that didn't happen.
Okay, that specifically, that point of the substandard work, the cutting corners, and the recognition from the PSC of that cutting corners to save money, which led to subpar work, and whether or not there was any compensation for that, which it sounds like there was not. But that's okay. Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions for Irene? Oh, one thing, Irene, you and I briefly discussed this last night. You said there's a possibility that the PSC isn't as sold on advanced metering technology as we feared they might be, and put off now until 2022. So,
well, that was already within the rate case that there was going to be a delay in the installation of the smart meters. They were going to do some of the basic work first, but because of COVID, they knew that they couldn't get into houses to do the change outs in the houses. So they were going to do some of the other prep work first. And, it's also on a buy now, pay later kind of scheme. We're certainly paying some within this rate case, but it'll be amortized over many years as well. Commissioner John Howard did make comments within this rate case, as they offer their vote on approving or not approving. And he commented that he has started to question the value of AMI, but that kind of didn't go anywhere. He still voted to support the whole JP being joint proposal, the negotiated settlement. He also, in a subsequent, I think it was on consent agenda, voted against the smart meter component of something that Niagara Mohawk was doing. So he seems to be starting to turn against smart meters, which is interesting. I've had some interesting conversations with some people who are doing some really high tech and stuff with sort of automating everything that right now, you know, the smart meters, you had to get price signals and you had to look at your, you know, get a ding on your smartphone or, you know, set alarms and set alerts and not use your refrigerator during certain hours and crazy stuff.
Yeah.
But there's right now another proceeding going on at the PSC that's sort of related to smart meter because they're looking system-wide. What's the data that's needed to run an efficient grid and to be able to integrate renewables well and to manage peak loads well and to really, you know, try and identify what are the different chunks of data that are needed going forward. And there's now an initiative to make sure that whatever equipment gets installed is able to provide the data that they're determining in this data proceeding is needed. And so I did some behind the scenes work to talk to the guy who's sort of a lead staffer on that proceeding to say to him, hey, you know, is the stuff that NYSEG's going to be putting in, is it going to work within this data proceeding and the new data that, and he said it's his job to make sure it does, that it will.
And I hope that a big piece of that is going to be communicating that to customers in a way that's actually useful and enabling them to use.
Well, part of it is that I think that what they're starting to realize is that the customer engagement piece is not going to work well. But that there's a lot of other ways that it can be automated that will work well. And so
that's interesting.
Yeah. So I think that, you know, there are going to be changes in how smart the smart meters are versus how much they need to rely on our participation. And I suspect that that's one of the changes that we'll see going forward.
So they have to be smarter than we are.
Yeah. And so anyhow, the other thing is that there is, I don't remember the specifics of it, but there are certain kinds of clawbacks within the JP that if the smart meter program didn't meet certain expectations, because they promised a whole lot of things that the smart meter program was going to do. And we had some kind of clawbacks in there that if it didn't, that, you know, they would have to pay up or reimburse or something for some of that stuff. So that's kind of cool. The other thing that I'm really excited about is there's a new person, a new position that the governor has created at the Public Service Commission to be the consumer, I forget his name, but basically the consumer watchdog within the PSC. And he's a pretty high-powered guy. I believe he's an attorney. And this kind of dovetails with another initiative that the governor has of, I think that we'll see it within this coming budget, a set of rules that makes it a lot easier to throw a utility out if they're not performing up to the standards. So there was a big ruling at this past PSC meeting where several of the downstate utilities got fined for their poor storm response, including prior to this, NYSEG had been the worst and had gotten, NYSEG RG&E had gotten a $14 million fine for 2019 failures of storm response for $14 million. They just fined Con Ed $104 million for their failed storm response downstate. So I think the governor's getting kind of serious about getting the utilities to shape up or ship out. And we'll have to see where all of that goes. I have suspicions that what the governor is looking to do is throw the utilities out and take all of it over under state authority, whether it's the New York Power Authority, there's already the Long Island Power Authority. And so, you know, however, whatever plans, but I suspect that he's looking to municipalize all of it.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Irene. That's our report from the case board. So now, Amanda, you had something you wanted to bring up from Water Resources Council.
Yeah, on a very different topic.
Yeah.
So some folks may know that we've been wanting to have a Cayuga Lake rules and regulations plan. And there is a subcommittee of the Water Resources Council that is working on that, but it's kind of all been, and I see Darby is here, so if I get this wrong, she can correct me. But it's all kind of been hinging on and waiting on the Owasco Lake rules and regulations. And those finally came out and were approved by the various towns and villages around Owasco Lake. You probably know that parts of Groton are in the Owasco Lake watershed. So this is why it also applies to us. But it's not really enough for the local municipalities to have these rules and regulations. It has to go to the state. And then the state will look it over and say if they approve of it. But apparently the state has never really wanted to change any rules and regulations, and they don't want them to be individualized. So it's a little bit iffy if the state is going to approve these. So the WRC is considering if they want to have a resolution to send to the state or some kind of letter to say that we approve of the actual rules and regulations, but that we urge the state to, go with the process and allow these to be adopted by the municipalities. So it's tangentially related to us because it does affect Groton, but if the state does not allow them to update these rules and regulations, then probably nobody else can make their own. So it would be a moot point if we wanted to have Cayuga Lake rules and regulations. So we really want the state to allow this to happen. So anyway, it's sort of just an informational thing for people to know. I think there was, some concern at the Water Resources Council that this was not gonna go through at the state level, and then we can't do it ourselves. So.
Amanda.
Yeah.
Is Cayuga County going to be sending a supporting resolution up?
I don't know. I think there are numerous municipalities who are working on sending something to the state to say, and I think they're collecting letters, and that's why it came up at the WRC last week, because they are trying to collect information from other folks saying that we support this. But I don't know specifically who is doing that.
Okay. Well, it seems sensible that Cayuga and Tompkins County both should be supportive of this. If that's what our constituent municipalities want to do. So
Yeah.
keep us posted. I see a question from Anna.
This is just an update. Deborah, do you remember, it was a year ago, you and I went to, I think it was Cayuga County. We met with Eileen O'Connor.
Oh yeah, that was like 2.5 years ago. Time flies.
That says way too much. So she reached out to me after the election and sent me updated information on this, as well as the council resolution endorsing and supporting the adoption of the revised Owasco Lake Watershed Rules and Regulations resolution that they sent to the state. I can share it with everyone if we want to use it as a template to pass something similarly here to show our support for them.
Yeah, why don't you share it with the committee members? You said that was the council that passed the resolution. Has the county passed something?
Let's see. Yeah, this is the city of Auburn, the town of Owasco. It looks like. I don't know. I don't know if you know, Amanda, this is your baby, so I'm happy to give this resolution to you. If
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure we can discuss if we want to pass a resolution. I mean, there was a lot of talk at the WRC about being very clear that we're not, it would take us all a long time to read through all the actual rules and regulations. We don't necessarily want to endorse the actual rules. We want to endorse the process. And you know, it's not really up to us to say what the rules should be. It's up to us to say that, you know, that those people on that lake should be able to decide for themselves what their rules and regulations are.
right. So if they pass, if the state allows for it, it gives precedent for us to then.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
I'll share the resolution that they passed just so that we have it and we can review
Okay.
it. It looks like it was the city, not the county, but at least it'll give us some background. So I'll give the documents that she shared with me.
Okay, and I see Darby came on, and I guess I'm not quite remembering what we decided in WRC. We were going to give it some more time, right? And then decide if we were going to send a letter or a resolution.
Right. Cynthia just sent out an email today, Cynthia Brock, the chair of the WRC, for a possible, I mean, she's changed the language around from what the city of Auburn and town of Owasco have, but we do have a resolution in the works. And I think the last resolve statement is asking the Tompkins County Legislature to adopt a similar resolution. So we'll have that. The WRC meets in the third Monday of December. So it might not be until January that you guys get to take a look, or we could preview it with you to see if you want to take any action.
Well, it's good. It's good that we've got a heads up that this is coming.
Yeah, and I can just share the resolution then as background, since it sounds like you guys are way on top of this. And that way we'll just all see it and see what they're doing.
Okay.
Thank you. That's all. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. All right. So does anybody else have anything pressing that they want to bring up? If not, we will move along to planning and sustainability and Scott's report on our fleet and our charging infrastructure.
We're going to start this off with Darby setting the stage here. Isn't that right, Darby?
You bet. Yeah.
Great.
Great. So I'm going to share my presentation. We've got quite the lineup for you guys today with all right, sharing a screen. Everybody seeing that as a slideshow?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. Thanks. So yeah, we got quite the lineup. It's not always, I think, that even planners plan so well to have all these presentations queued up and ready to go for the same meeting. So it's really great to be able to pull it all together here at this meeting. So I'm going to start with the 2019 Community and County Government Greenhouse Gas emissions and energy use inventories. And these are, we've done these every 5 to 6 years in the past decade. And so what I'm going to report on, like I said, the community side, but then also the county government, which I think could leave us with some head scratching. So it's really great to have Megan and Scott following up with the facilities and the fleet, so that we see that we're really making some great progress on moving things forward. So I'll be presenting this again at the legislature meeting on December 15th. We'll have the full documents available. They're nearly complete. We're going through a bunch of editing. This is a couple 100 pages of information that I'm gonna get through in about 14 slides. So don't expect great detail, but it's all there, and we can elaborate more into the future. I just want to first acknowledge a huge amount of input into this came from Andrea Aguirre from our department, who led the data collection for the the government side of things. It was really complicated and messy, and she persevered through the many challenges it took to get through all the information and find out what we needed to know to input into these emissions inventories. So I'm going to start right off with the conclusions, give you some takeaways so that you know what you'll be hearing as we go through this. So, as I mentioned, we do these to account for greenhouse gas emissions and our energy use, and we've been tracking this since 1998, but we'll be showing comparisons in 2008 and 2014. So everyone asks, well, how's the community doing? Well, we're seeing some modest reductions in the energy use in the community since 2014 and 2008. And then we see greater reductions in the emissions, but that's largely tied to the grid changes that have been occurring the last 5 or so years. And then the next question is, how's the government doing? Well, we see some reductions in the building energy use, but unfortunately, you're going to see some increases in the fleet emissions, but we have some good stories of why we think that might be happening. I'm going to have 2 quick things that are slight asides, just because they're not, we track them in these reports, but they're not very tightly tied to the emissions inventories. And one is the progress on renewable energy generation. So this slide shows the 1,000% increase in renewable energy in the last 10-ish years. And one is the solar. So that includes residential and small scale commercial and the larger scale commercial and the projects that were done and online by the end of 2019. So you see a 6,000% increase, which is kind of hard to wrap your head around, but we see them. We see the bigger projects going in, and we expect to see more in the near and coming future. And then the second part is we don't track very well the increases in the electric vehicles that we have in the we track it in the community, but it doesn't show up very well in the transportation numbers. So by the end of 2019, we had 644 plug-in electric vehicles. I think it's up by another 150 already in 2020. And that's about 1.3% of the registered vehicles. And that's actually pretty high for across New York State. And here's a great example of my completely adorable electric e-Golf. So moving into the community. So I'm going to start with everything that we have data for community emissions. And that includes buildings and transportation and agriculture in the commercial industry, residential. So everything, again, that we have data for. And we see continued progress. In the last 5 years, we've had a reduction about 10% since 2014. And then that's about 30% below the levels from 2008. So pretty good increase or decreases in those. And then in the emissions, we can break it down into different sectors. So the first area is the commercial and industrial sector. And we see some pretty good decreases there. So 50% from 2008 and another 25% or so from 2014. And another good example is residential. That's about a 35% decrease since 2008. The transportation always feels like a slightly fuzzy because it's regional numbers and sometimes some older data. So it's not a great estimate for what we're really doing in Tompkins County. So that's I think there's better modeling to come, and so we'll see more in the future on that. So the reasons for the progress within the community, we see less energy use in the commercial and industrial sectors. So they're not only emitting less, but then also just using less energy. We see the growth in renewables, and then we do see changes to the electric grid. This is a regional number, but we see the fossil fuel percentages. So this is from 2008, 2014, and then to 2019, dropping below 30% of the energy sources used for our energy grid. And then the non-carbon inputs into our electricity is going up, which is good news to see. And as for those of you who can even try to think back to 5 or so years ago, we did a lot with methane calculations. And the research at the time, we were looking at this new unconventional extraction method. And the concern was that the leakage rate from methane extraction was really high. And so at the time, the science was, it was between 5 to 19%. And so those numbers were applied to our emissions calculations, and it just showed things weren't looking good at all. But the folks who've been working on that have done some recalculations, and Dr. Howarth came out with a couple of new papers this summer, which I know the case board took a look at, and he's estimated that to be a lot lower. The leakage rate is closer to 3.6%, and that's what he's recommending to the state to use for their calculations with the statewide emissions levels. So that's an important part of the story that is included in the emissions calculations. And then another additional calculation we do is we look at methane as its global warming potential. So if you've heard Bob Howarth or Tony Ingraffia talk about these, there's the 100-year timeline of how long carbon dioxide stays in the atmosphere, but then methane has a much shorter life, but it's much more potent. So we apply this additional calculation on there, and it basically doubles the emissions with the greenhouse gas with the natural gas that we use in the community. So it's an important factor as we consider moving forward. I don't know how many people caught the really depressing news this morning that despite the lockdowns associated with the pandemic, the CO2 levels have hit new record highs. So that was an article from The Guardian this morning. And so just, I feel like we can do what we can in the community. And we've been talking about a lot of the same areas for a number of years with the energy roadmap and the energy strategy that was put out last year. And so again, the critical things of reducing natural gas, whether that's with energy efficiency and electrification, but then also transportation. How do we reduce our miles that we travel, have more efficient vehicles, and then just keep growing our renewables? So, all right, that's community. So now I'm going to shift over to our government operations. So we use this as an example of what other local governments can do. And I know some of the other municipalities have done this, and it's, I don't want to say it's easy for them because it's all very complicated, but if you don't have 19 buildings or whatever we have, it's probably a little easier to track. So the main issue to point out is that we have an increase in our emissions by about 3% since 2014. And the good news is it's still more than 50% below our 2008 levels. But we can dig into that a little bit more. So in the building,
Darby.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Just to try to understand this, you were talking about the alternative way of calculating methane. And so you went through the 2008, the change we used in 2008, we used two different calculations for everything, using the traditional calculation for methane and our updated version. So when you make these comparisons now, which way are you using?
Right. So we're just taking the leakage rate. So what's applied to 2008 is from conventional numbers, and that's actually 3.8%. And then the 2014 and 2019 are updated with a 3.6% leakage rate. So it's kind of it's all across the board has been updated. So the take-home numbers are updated based on that latest science.
So you kind of you're using the apples to apples now.
Yep.
3.6 and 20-year potential.
Yeah, I mean, the 20-year potential is just kind of a different calculation that comes on at the end that just gets applied to all the natural gas usage. And then so we'll have that's kind of a separate table that will be for that area.
Okay, thanks. I was trying to understand these comparisons. Thanks very much.
Yeah, and that's a hard one to cover in one slide.
Darby, before you continue,
Yeah.
can I clarification? Do
Yeah.
these numbers all for the community all include Cornell, or is that separate?
It does all include Cornell. So we will have a separate section in the report that pulls Cornell out. So that is part of the report.
And in general, because of what the initiatives that they've done on average, are their emissions less?
They have gone down, yes. I can't tell you what the percentage is off the top of my head, but I can find that pretty quickly.
Great, thank you.
Yep. All right, so moving on to the government side of things. Let me start. Okay, so we said that there's a 3% increase in the last 5 years in the emissions. And so for buildings and facilities, that has gone down 14% in that amount of time in the 5 years. And the big one to point out is we could really see a decrease in the emissions and energy use at the airport associated with the upgrades that were done last year. So that's one of our biggest energy users in the county, and they did see a good decrease. And then the rest of the numbers move up and down, and Arel can probably tell you more about that, and Megan will get into that too. And then the other story with the fleet is that our 3 biggest users are the highway department, the sheriff's office, and the airport. And those all saw increases between 2014 and 2019. And they have variable reasons. I mean, the highway department, it depends on how much snow there is from year to year. The sheriffs know that they've been patrolling a little bit more in the maybe before than they were before, and also just covering more ground on the western part of the county. And then a couple interesting other pieces to note is that the airport has some new regulations from the FAA that requires them basically run 24/7 during snow events, which is, if they're considered unsafe, then it means they can't open for 2 weeks. So that they saw a big increase for that reason. And we saw some changes with the fuel that the highway department uses. So that really affects these numbers. So in 2008, they were using just straight diesel, and they transitioned to a biodiesel in 2009-ish that they were using when we did the 2014 inventory. And so that was a lower emitter, but unfortunately it was causing them some mechanical issues. So they converted their B10 and B20 to a B5, which has a higher emissions rate. So unfortunately, the cleaner fuel was not working well for them, so they switched back. So that helps us understand why we do see the increases there. And I am going to not take away the thunder of my colleagues, knowing that they're going to talk about the facilities and the fleet next. Scott will have his recommendations. And so this is super high level. You guys have some good questions, and I know you guys are well educated on what has been done in the past. So the report is big and dense and filled with tables and graphs and numbers, and you guys can dig into that when that comes out in a week or so. And then if you have any other questions, I'm happy to take maybe a couple in a minute or two here. Try to get this mouse to wake up.
I don't see any blue hands.
All right, well, I left some exciting things for Megan to take on then.
Nice. Let me just share real quick. Okay.
Yeah, but while we're waiting for,
If you have a question.
yeah, thanks. Any takeaways, Darby, for the community side? What to do, what to recommend,
Yeah, I mean, I think with that, it's just I hate to say the same story we've been putting out there of reducing natural gas usage and the electrification, and unfortunately this report is more just like data gathering more so than recommendations, and I think we have the planning documents in the last few years to guide those.
And would we have on the reduced use of commercial and industrial, would we have an idea if that's a result of reduced commercial and industrial activity?
I think it's more that their usage or any of their electricity usage from the grid is going to be what's pushing that. So if they're just, their electricity that comes more now from renewables than from fossil fuels.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, I would note that the difference in the residential sector was so tiny. I think really we need to be focused on retrofitting our existing buildings to be vastly more energy efficient than they are. And that's a real hard nut to crack because there's not a lot of grant money for that. And I don't know where we're going to go with that, but that's something for the case board to work on. Okay, Scott, you ready?
Actually, I'm going to interrupt and be a little bit of a bridge between Darby and Scott. So I'm sort of the transition between our inventories, which are telling us basically where we are with especially in the government operations inventory with our facilities and fleet. And so I'm going to update you a little bit more on what's going on there before turning it over to Scott, who'll share the fleet management framework that really provides the recommendations for the next steps with our fleet. So just in terms of how we got to today, so the energy strategy has both an internal and external focus. And so that internal focus recognized that our fleet and facilities needed inventory and analysis so that we could chart the path to net zero emissions. Whoops, and I'm bumping buttons. And then the capital plan provides the bold funding strategy to help us achieve that goal through significant investments in our facilities and fleet. And then serendipitously, the timing of the Clean Energy Communities grant, half of which is going for the Business Energy Advisors program, so that external piece, and then half to our internal work, specifically to the green fleet. That timed out well. We already had a consultant secured working with Scott. And so we were able to kind of loop that work in and kind of pull it into the broader facilities and fleet look that we've been doing. And so we established an internal team. I think we originally had a really glamorous name like Energy Records and Management, something like that. But really what it's come down to is a focus on our facilities and fleet. And so that team includes Jason and Arel and Katie, Scott, Andrea, myself, and until recently, Nick Murphy. So everybody's put in considerable work both with our facilities and fleet. Some of which I know many of you heard last week when Arel was presenting to F&I about the flex tech studies that we're going to be undertaking. So that was the most time-sensitive opportunity. 2020 has been all about leveraging opportunities and making lemons out of all the lemonade in this year. And fortunately, there were some NYSERDA opportunities that all the work the county has done put us in a good position to take on. And so the Flex Tech opportunity was the most time sensitive. We needed that application in this year. So it's fantastic. That will be moving forward. And that's going to give us a very deep understanding of our individual facilities, payback periods for different options with them, because as both Arel noted last week and as Darby showed in her in the inventories, we saw significant improvement between 2008 and 2014 in terms of emissions in our facilities. But that was when we were undertaking through our energy performance contract a lot of the kind of the low-hanging fruit that had fast payback and made huge impacts. And since then, apart from the airport, we've been a little bit more plateauing with not as much significant work happening. So these Flex Tech studies are going to provide a fantastic amount of information to make decisions about the next level of investments in a financially sound manner. So the next NYSERDA opportunity and the next most time sensitive is this real-time energy management opportunity. And so in the Lansing natural gas moratorium area, there is an opportunity for buildings to get kind of an enhanced level of NYSERDA assistance to implement what is short RTEM. And essentially this is hardware, so sensors and a cloud-based software system that provide automated energy management or monitoring, I should say, in buildings. So they're continuously pulling data from our buildings into the cloud so you can see it in real time. You can be seeing it more moment by moment versus looking at your NYSEG bill and finding out, 30, 40 days after the fact that for some reason you happen to use a lot of energy one month and you don't know what day something happened. It's really hard to identify the specifics of what's happening with your building when you're just looking at a monthly bill. So that's going to get us kind of a pilot with our buildings up in Lansing with health and emergency response. And so we can test that out and look at if that's an investment that we should be making in other buildings. And then the last opportunity in the near term that we're pursuing through NYSERDA is this on-site energy manager program. And so this is where NYSERDA provides funding that will match with county funding, which could be used for either a staff hire or a consultant, essentially, to provide energy management services for an organization's portfolio of buildings when they don't have a dedicated staff person working on that. And so this gives us the opportunity, it typically runs for, say, like a couple of years. And we're looking at using a consultant because you can get a much higher level of energy expertise. And so this will provide some of that additional assistance, especially to facilities. So as the flex tech information comes in, we have those reports. We'll also have, an expert consultant working directly with the county, familiar with all of our facilities, able to help us determine the next steps for each particular facility. So that's an exciting opportunity to come with our facilities. So then flipping over to the fleet piece of things. Let's see. I don't want to take away from Scott's presentation, but just as kind of a quick recap, there's been a lot of work already done in addition to the 23 electric and plug-in vehicles that the county has already acquired. We have both the charging infrastructure report as well as the fleet review and analysis report that you saw earlier in the summer that have provided a lot of the background information. So much of 2020 has been kind of establishing like the information that we need to make the next step in decisions. And so with that, I will turn things over to Scott, unless you have any questions for me, because the fleet management framework is really exciting as it lays out recommendations for what we can do in next steps to reduce the emissions on our fleet side.
Okay, I guess before we move on to Scott's presentation, does anybody have any questions for Megan? Okay, I don't see any blue hands. So Scott, finally you're on.
Excellent setting of the stage there. Thank you. All right. So I provided you quite a few resources in your packet. I'll refer to that, but I thought it would be helpful to give you a little bit of an overview on this too. It's really helpful to have this context. Actually, I hope you find it helpful too. This connection between the government operations and household, you can't help but think about that with vehicles. As a household, I know when I thought through investing in an electric vehicle, it's a hard thing to think about. All right, how can I get away with this type of use? All right, how am I going to plug it in? How am I going to afford that? There's a lot of those details you got to think through. And full well that's a huge chunk of your energy bill. You know it every time you fill up your tank, right? So you can do something about it, and you can do something in a tangible way by investing in this. But there's a lot to think through. So think about that now at, of course, our government level, where you have 175 vehicles in your garage with probably 50 different types of uses of those vehicles. So you really have to think through kind of a lot of that, kind of what that looks like. So here's the great thing though, this NYSERDA grant that we've been working on the last couple of years has helped us really understand that a lot more, understand more about our fleet, our departments, how they use things, what they've had troubles with managing their fleets, what they're kind of nervous about with electric vehicles, all those types of things have come up. So what's really great too is now that this framework shows us that we can do something about this. We've seen it, of course, how Darby has outlined in the gas emissions inventory. We have to chip away at this. I think this framework's a good way to do that, to show kind of based on best practices, also kind of different departmental needs, how we can do that in the short term. and then also have long-term benefits. And I think it's a way we can do it too, that's going to provide, some leadership for all of us that work in county government. I think we can provide some leadership for other municipalities too. But also, I think there's a connection between our employees and then also the public too, to show hopefully we can learn from and help educate and promote the fact this is a viable, increasingly handy technology. Okay, so just looking back, I really appreciate Megan giving a reminder of the things that we've talked about, because we have discussed a few of these things over the last couple of years, really. Back in early 2019, we started this NYSERDA project, and way long ago, last August, I first talked to Peak about what we were initially finding when it came to the charging infrastructure report. Now, this is an appendix in your on your packet page 28. This is included as well as an appendix from just to remind you of that. Just took a look at what we currently have for how we charge vehicles right now and where we need to make some investments and improvements in those systems. So then you remember probably just a couple of months ago, we talked about that larger fleet review and analysis report. That was in June of this year. And that was the one that had all the different recommendations by the different departments for what we needed to increase or what we needed to change and what kind of issues we looked at. It was kind of the precursor to what we're talking about today. But today is today, and this is November. Peak, we're talking about the framework, and this really is the succinct path forward for how we're going to be able to chip away and accomplish this. The other thing I don't want to downplay is the fact that this NYSERDA grant allowed us a lot of research and support and that outside consultant guidance to do that, a lot of this investment, but it also helped us to acquire, pay for the difference in a lot of these vehicles, invest in some charging equipment that facilities help us to learn through, what they needed help with in installing, but also showing the capabilities for the fact that they can handle a lot of this stuff for installation. So between all this grant actually works really well in terms of what a grant should do in terms of clarifying what our need is and helping us to kind of sharpen our resources. So that's really great. And I'll make sure that's clear in the reporting on this grant as well. So this framework that you have in front of you, that's really detailed. Well, it's in the memo on packet page 10, but also it starts on packet page 12. It's in greater detail. Basically shows the action blueprint that the county should take to advance the conversion of the fleet to plug-in electric vehicles. And if you remember back in June, we talked about this isn't going to be certainly every vehicle we have, but we think we can make a case to make some significant inroads on most of the vehicles. And of course, the main goal is to manage the fleet in such a way to reduce consumption of fossil fuels. That's the real driver on this. There's a lot of, I think, other benefits with efficiencies of government. Also, I think longer term cost savings, but this is our main driver right now, reduction of fossil fuels. Okay, so the framework in front of you recommends 6 different ways to do that. There's a lot of supporting documentation for that. The first of which, and I'm going to tell you and just show you kind of one slide on each of these in a minute. First is revising the green fleet policy. I'll show you that in just a minute. That's really the guiding piece that's going to help move this forward. The next 2 are related. That's why they're grouped. What's the accelerate plan based on our conversations over the years with the departments, where we see with some outside guidance, where we can have the most kind of significant increases in reducing fossil fuels by acquiring vehicles in the next couple of years. Many more models of vehicles coming online that are helpful to advance our different goals. With that, where are we going to invest in charging stations? There's a couple areas there where we can make some easy improvements. The next 2 are also related, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute, but we talked a little bit about telematics before. This is something that's recommended that we further implement and utilize, and I'll tell you what we've done so far with that. That's going to help us to right size our fleet. How can we reduce vehicles and share vehicles better and maximize those opportunities? And lastly, it's really recommended based on guidance from best practices in our communities. Centralizing fleet management is really going to make all this stuff come together. And ultimately, that will help us to, keep honest to reduce these consumption of fossil fuels, because there's a lot of details kind of in this various aspects that centralized management is going to help all of us to achieve that goal. So the first one, I'll just give you, these are just one slide each. They're a page or two throughout the document. This first one is on packet page 13. It talks about revising the green fleet policy. Basically, there's a snapshot of what the recommendation is with some narrative. There's some kind of first and secondary steps. This is a kind of a screen grab off of one of the first step charts from that. And that's kind of modeled throughout here. So that gives you a sense of what we need to do first with all the supporting documentation behind that. So we have an existing green fleet policy, but really the clarification is it's not working how we want it to. So the idea is rewrite this thing to sharpen the procedures in particular to help support the ultimate goal of reducing fossil fuels. We've already drafted a lot of this aspect based on what we've learned with the consultant team. This is something we can definitely advance in the early part of next year to really set the stage for advancing along the way of reduction and efficiencies that we want. So that's the first recommendation that I think is really going to prove to be very helpful. Much of the detail in this framework is, hey, what exactly are the recommendations for where to invest in accelerating the purchase of vehicles in the next couple of years? So it's definitely recommended, and we've talked a lot about that, how we can use some capital funding to invest in really assisting this transition over to vehicles in the direction we want to. So this is a lot of narrative that's further detailed on packet page 14 as well. And there's an appendix that outlines these are the types of vehicles and which departments you should target first for the biggest gains. So there's kind of a walk through a process here. A lot of this too has to do with purchasing, to think through the timing of when departments order vehicles and how can we, do that together to make that work a little bit smoother, to get the vehicles we want in the time that we need them. Everyone's a little bit off with that. We learned about that process, but we think we can make investments of at least another 10 vehicles in the next year to transition a lot of these vehicles over. So with that, of course, is also charging stations. I find through the use of our county department vehicle, man, it's really nice not to have to go to a gas station when you come back from field work anymore. And that's helpful from just a government practice point of view, but really need that charging thing to be station to be set up when I get back to go plug that thing in. We need to do that across the board for every new vehicle we have so that we have capabilities for doing that. I think we might be able to have some kind of sharing opportunities as we get into this deeper, but this is something we need to make further investments in. And great news is, again, Facilities has done a great job helping with this and they continue to do. The fourth one is about this telematics concept. And I'm not going to talk too much about this, but I want to tell you a little bit about it. We talked in the summer, but this is basically, again, these small devices installed in vehicles that kind of give you a whole sense of different performance, basics from odometer readings to more detailed things about how much you have in gas savings. Also, hey, how are you moving forward in terms of your greenhouse gas emission goals? Really great reporting. One of the great things I want to report with you in the last couple of months, we've actually been able to take advantage and kind of piggyback on a grant that our consultant Energetics had to Department of Energy grant to actually install telematics to see how they work in all of our electric vehicles. So they're all installed in the 23 vehicles that we have. We're getting that live data back right now, and we're just seeing how that works. We think that is going to really help our operations, and we're going to see how that works to do that. So that's a great no cost thing we're working on now. So we want to try to expand on that, and that feeds directly into this number 5, which talks about right sizing our fleets. With a lot of that data you gain and kind of how things are used, where vehicles go, how much charge they have left on them, all these details, we can find out more opportunities for, what vehicles we no longer need, where we can see opportunities to share vehicles. Do we even need vehicles for certain meetings? Certainly we learned a lot about that this last year. So that's another thing that's a recommendation, to look for more of those opportunities, and with more data, we'll be able to do that next year. So you see some more timeline information in here as well. So then the last piece just talks a little bit more about centralizing fleet management. It is a lot of detail to track. And typically, you know, there's kind of one person in each department that knows a little bit more than the rest in terms of the fleet. But it's really hard, especially, you know, you think about the greenhouse gas impacts and all these other pieces that feed into the vehicle maintenance. It really is needed to have a point person at the county for doing that work. So that's something that's recommended from our consultant, to look at that from moving forward. And we have some ideas for how to do that and what types of things they need to work on as well. So that will ultimately connect us back to, again, that ultimate savings and fossil fuel use. So that's a 50-cent overview. Again, I have the 50 plus pages in the packet there that kind of follow up a little more detail with this. Again, each of the reports are in there as well, but I wanted to just give you that little bit overview, and then be open discussion of questions you might have about it.
Okay, questions, anybody? I'm looking for blue hands. Oh,
I've got my hand up.
I see
Dan
Dan at
has
the
a
end of the dinner
question.
table.
All right.
Thank you. I have several questions. They're all around the idea of sort of a cost benefit in terms of both money and energy. If you don't have the answers right now, that's fine. So the first one, is there a way to characterize the energy savings or the carbon reduction, or however we might want to characterize it, of electric vehicles versus petroleum vehicles?
Is there a way to categorize that? Yes, I think there is. I wouldn't have that off the top of my head right now, but it's definitely a significant improvement by going electric, but I couldn't tell you that off the top of my head, but I'll dig that up for you.
Thank you.
Pretty sure EPA has calculators that can spit that number out for you.
Thank you. And then from a purely financial point of view, how do we think about the fuel cost savings and the maintenance costs versus the price of the vehicle? I assume that electric vehicles are more expensive to purchase when we don't have grants. So I'd be interested in just kind of how the money shakes out when you take into account all of the things that go into the life of a vehicle.
Yeah, you had a really good question about that too last time we talked. I appreciate you bringing that up again too. And I've thought a lot about that in terms of savings. So the start with the kind of retail cost. That is something that we've been reviewing reports that have shown we're fast approaching, because of battery reduction costs, kind of a leveling out of the parity of the cost of vehicles within the, I mean, our research has shown that this a 5 to 10 year period. GM had this report last week that said that they think in 5 years they're going to be level with conventional vehicles in terms of cost. But you're right. Right now, it still is a cost. There is a premium for the cost for the investment in electric vehicles. The research is from our consultant has said maintenance costs, it's still, you know, we're still in the early kind of time frame for that. But based on the mechanics of how these things are maintained, the current industry belief is maintenance is considerably down on electric vehicles. Now we'll see, because there's less moving parts. Time will tell on that, and we'll certainly be tracking that very closely as a part of this work for sure. Your fuel point one is a good one too. We have part of the telematics will tell that story for us. I have actually looking this morning too about our electric vehicles and how much over the course of the month have we estimated cost savings. We certainly pay for the electric that fuels this, but there is also fuel savings because of that. Certainly we're not paying for that, but we have some savings. That's the one I'd have to dig into more too in terms of like, hey, what's that over the course of the lifetime of vehicle to tell you for sure. One interesting point about that fuel savings too is part of this telematics is showing us for those plug-in electric vehicles, the one that's split between gas and electric use. How much of the time do we use, does that car use gas over electric? The telematics shows you that shift. And for the most part, so far, it's interesting to see most of our operations, we can get away with using electric for the most of that. So we do have savings in utilizing the electric source. which of course, the electric too, we have a cleaner source for sure for supplying the energy, but the full answer to your question, I think I'd have to dig into that a little bit more.
Great, thank you. What is the expected lifespan of a charging station?
Great question. I know when we've had third-party retailers talk to us about, ones that they install that operate independently, they talk on a kind of 5 to 10 year time period, but those are usually the ones that have software components to it, like a cloud-based piece. We've had ones that have gone for at least 5 years, and they're pretty low-tech systems. I think because of less of the detail, less of the mechanics and computer components to it, I think they last a lot longer. You'll notice, for instance, when you leave the building, part of what our guidance has said, hey, what can we do to make these longer lasting as a whole? One of the things that they recommended is the one that's on the old court, or across on the old jail, is a system that plugs in. There's no computer with that, of course, but it's mounted on the wall, which has a greater lifespan, and it's cheaper actually. And it also has some cord management to it, so it actually recoils the cord and goes back up, because there's been some problems in the past with some snow maintenance and stuff that have kind of damaged cords. But those small things sometimes will make those last quite a bit longer. So I would expect these things to, I think we can get a decade out of these at least.
Great, thank you. My last question, I remember when you gave the telematics presentation, I think it was 6 months ago or so, earlier this year, you mentioned again today that the company was giving us some amount of time, a few months or a year of free trial period. And then there's like a subscription fee or an annual maintenance fee after that.
Right.
Do you remember what that annual fee is?
Yeah, so we have it's great with this grant. We have this for, I think, 18 months, no cost, and we actually get to keep the units after that. So there's no cost to set that up, but you're right. After that period of time, it's a nominal cost. I mean, I think it's probably under $100 a year per vehicle, but it's not nothing, but it's something that we're trying to see, hey, is this worth the information we're getting? Would that be worth the investment? I feel like I think for these particular units, I think there's a $60 annual cost typically. The other really great thing we're trying now too with this resource is how this integrates with the highway department's maintenance software log to see how those systems work together. So to make a firm recommendation, do we want to really use this throughout the fleet? We want to see how those components work, but it's a cost, but I don't think it's an exorbitant one.
Thank you.
Scott, I thought there was something in this report that said there was like a $25 monthly subscription fee per vehicle.
I think that's on some of those charging units. I mean, that's not something we're enrolled in right now, but there's many different programs that you can utilize that have, that have different resources and software you can utilize. So, but it's not more than $100 a year, I know, for most of these.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I have Amanda, Anna, and then Martha.
Great. Well, thank you to all of you for the presentations. I have a couple questions as well. So just looking through all the recommendations, you've spelled out like how many hours various things will take. Are these things already on your work plan for the coming year, or is this whole project on your work plan? I guess I'm just wondering what that looks like for 2021.
I'll answer that one. It's on our work program for probably first and second quarter of 2021, but our firm hope is that the Chief Sustainability Officer will be hired in that time frame, and that person will then honestly be able to dig into all of the questions that are being raised here. It's kind of a great opportunity to repoint the need for this position. So thank you again to the legislature for funding that position.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. And then I guess along those lines, one of the recommendations is for a person to a sort of centralized person to oversee the fleet or the whole thing. I guess I'm just wondering, is that enough work for one person, or is that something else that the chief sustainability officer would do?
I think at this point, the hope is that the chief sustainability officer would do that. If it turns into a much bigger job than that, then maybe that's something that person would need to raise to discuss with committees and legislature. But yeah, right now the vision is that person would manage the fleet. Yep.
Okay. And then last question. I feel like I read in here somewhere, or one of you mentioned the sheriff's department, and I remember something about that from a previous presentation. Do they have any electric vehicles, and is it feasible for them to have any?
They don't. Well, I'm getting the echo down here now too. What was really revealing with this is I've heard for years about how the sheriff that could never do any types of advancements with this type of work at the sheriff's department. This project yielded that may not be true. We think, and they said as much, they really want to try, if they can figure out the cost saving or cost difference, to invest in some of the hybrid electric vehicles and some of their pursuit vehicles, but also they like the idea of looking at electric for stuff they use like at the airport, or potentially bring people for, people in training to go to the different schools for training. So I think there's small chunks, particularly in the hybrid electric camp, if they can make some investments there or saving, if that works for them, that could help a lot.
Is there, maybe you don't know, but is there technology for like, patrol cars or stuff? Does that even exist?
Yeah. One of the models that Sergeant Koskinen is really interested in, and we'll be working, one of the recommendations is to work with them to try to acquire one of these, is actually it's kind of like a hybrid, almost like a Ford Explorer type model, but it's more efficient than the current Charger. So that can be fully equipped as a pursuit vehicle too. So that's something that they're really interested to try. It's something that a lot of departments are already trying, across the country, but I think they need to see how that would work for them. I know that they like the space that brings too. So I'm really hopeful about the sheriff's department that we can make some inroads with that, and they're open to it.
Great, thank you.
Okay, is that everything, Amanda? Thanks. Okay, Anna.
Hi, yes. I had a few questions. And again, thank you everyone for all of your work. One of them was with all of the acquiring both the electric cars and more importantly, I think the charging stations. Is there any economies of scale where the larger amounts we buy when you've talked to the vendors? As well as with the software, is there any economies of scale? So we might want to consider that when we are creating our timeline of when we purchase and when we do replacements.
So we are aware of some of these purchasing not clearinghouses, I'm blocking the right word. These, you could take advantage of these. It's not like you could order 6 and get a price break there, but there's certainly some efficiencies on how we operate and order these things. I mean, it's certainly a lot easier when we group that together. But also I think for planning purposes, it's a lot easier for us to work with facilities to acquire the parts for these pieces in the beginning of the year so they can install them a little later on. I will look closer at that particular question to see, hey, are there price points where we're going to actually create more savings? I haven't heard necessarily that's the case, but you would think that maybe, particularly for charging equipment, that might work.
Yeah, I was thinking particularly with respect to charging. And another question, this is just me being out of date on this information. Are there any discussions, or have you kept up to date with, I highly doubt the federal is of much support, but state tax credits for any of this material or any of the equipment or the cars still?
Yeah, what's nice is, well, we've been really keeping tabs closely, as a kind of an aside to your question, on some of the funding support from different incentives, certainly there's the great state discount still on most models that you achieve. Now, we don't receive those in county government necessarily for the vehicles, but we've been able to take advantage of several different DEC funding sources that over the years that have allowed us to break and added funds for acquiring these things. So tax incentives still remain for a lot of these vehicles, particularly for our private citizens. But we continue to look at these different incentives that are kind of closely connected to those incentives still.
So there are some incentives for governments.
There are, they're not tax incentives per se, but there are other, in essence, grant supported add-ons.
Great. And this is an add-on to something Amanda was asking, but with respect to who Katie would take on the role of doing this, it sounds like to me that in the planning department, that would be the role of the implementation and planning of the infrastructure. But once it's all in place, maintenance, would that shift to the facilities department?
For the charging stations?
Charging stations, the fleet, I guess the rotation of everything and replacements, I guess, would stay in this department, or would that also move to facilities? I'm just trying to figure out what would be in which department, or is it all going to stay in planning?
No.
I think the vision is that the CSO would take over kind of the advising on which vehicles to purchase, working with finance to get the best prices, working to get the rebates or whatever they can get from the state to offset the costs. And then highway would probably continue to do the maintenance, and facilities would maintain the charging stations.
Okay, that's super helpful. Last comment, I remember a year or 2 years ago, I don't know if Ann Corman remembers this, she sent a few of us an article of electric police vehicles that existed already. She might want to reshare that with us because she's very excited about it and very up on it. It might have even been Tesla, but I can't remember what it was. So, and there is, Ann shared the vehicle cost calculator in the chat. Dan, if you want to see that.
I also shared in the chat a study I saw this weekend of Tesla police vehicles in Fremont, where they were saving $4,000 a year in fuel costs. So I think there is a lot of research out there on that topic.
Exciting topic and exciting time for it too. I think it's great that we're collectively investing in this.
Well, having seen how quickly Annie can go from 0 to in her Tesla, I think Tesla police cars are a great idea. So, Anna, are you done?
Yes, sorry. Yep.
Oh, that's fine. Martha.
Thanks very much. And I would put in a plug if it's possible to put out there the job postings for housing and energy sooner rather than later. I mean, and then maybe extend the posting time into January. We might be able to pick up some people who have some time to look around during the holidays. Anyway, just a plug there.
When they're not visiting with their families.
Exactly. Like, that's right. You never know. So my question might be a Darby question. On the whole greenhouse gas emissions calculation, I saw the comparisons from 2008 to 2014 to 2009 to 2019. But I didn't see, and maybe it's in the full report, any discussion of what sector of county, let's just say county government operations, is our biggest emissions burden. Is it our facilities? Is it our vehicles, or something else? And I would be interested when we've heard from Bob Howarth and others, kind of looking at the big picture for New York State. You know, what's the most urgent thing? Where's our biggest problem? People over the years have concentrated on the electric grid, when it seems that actually transportation and space heating have actually been more impactful and more of a problem. So I'm asking this question because it sort of anyway, I'm interested to know if you looked at it that way.
So are you asking about the government operations or the whole community?
Oh, I'm interested in both, but in terms of this question of our investments in our fleet, you know, if transportation is our biggest contributor to our overall emissions, then it makes even more sense to go ahead and spend the money and time that we might have to.
Right. Yeah. In terms of emissions, I'll just, if I can quick share this slide. You see the two gray bars are 2019. So this one is the buildings and facilities, and then this one is the vehicles and equipment. So they're pretty close in terms of their actual emissions numbers. You know, and they swap between 2014 and 2019, which one was higher. So they're both areas of focus in on. But we're going to have probably more impact on cleaner vehicles when we look at the emissions reductions that could be seen in the fleet, I think.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate that, Darby. I wasn't looking at that. I was looking at the year-to-year comparisons and not between categories. So that's very helpful.
Yep, thanks.
Okay, and now I think it's appropriate that we let Ann Corbin have the last word on this subject.
Thank you very much. I was watching this on YouTube and I was like, oh, electric cars. So of course I had to tune in. So thank you. Just one other thing that hasn't been mentioned, and I'm not sure if any of the talks we've had about electric cars, but there is a lot of environmental damage that is done when of course, when you're producing the gas, but storage of the gas at gas stations, filling cars, also the oil. So my car doesn't have oil, so I don't have to store the oil at home and spill it on the ground and then have that leftover oil when I change, you know, when you change the oil in your car either at home or at repair stations. So just wanted to mention that. And thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Annie. Okay, Scott, unless you have something final to say, I think we'll move on to Katie's report.
No, thanks very much. Great to talk to you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Good work.
All right, you ready for me?
Yes, we are.
Okay, I guess we're sticking with the energy theme here because the only thing I have to update you on for my commissioner's report is that our department submitted comments on the Office of Renewable Energy Siting draft regulations. We submitted those on November 12th, and since then they've extended the comment period till December 7th, so people have more time to submit comments if they would like, but we did want to get our comments done on the earlier side so that we could share them with others in case others were interested in what our comments were. We had a total of 14 comments. I will just highlight 3 of them for you. Many of them had to do with like setbacks from wetlands and streams and from tower heights and sensitive uses and that the kind of details of the regulations. But a couple of bigger picture items were that we wanted them to somehow give adequate opportunity for locals to be able to provide information from locally identified environmental resources. So, you know, we've got the Water Resources Council, their adopted wetlands maps. We've got our unique natural areas. We've got our scenic resources inventory. We've got some really quite robust, meaningful data and reports that really should be incorporated into these siting decisions and considered when looking at project avoidance and mitigation strategies. Another thing we brought up was that the regulations do a decent job of addressing how individual projects are expected to avoid, minimize, or mitigate impacts on agriculture. But there's really no looking at kind of the regional impacts of large numbers of prime soils being put under solar panels. or wind farms. And so we suggested that ORES come up with some kind of regional thresholds for the maximum amount of prime agricultural soils that would be utilized for solar and wind, recognizing that it's not just the soil resource, that if you want thriving agricultural communities, you need a certain density of farms to support the tractor mechanics and all of the distributors, that whole kind of business network that you need for a farming community to do well. And the last point was really just an overarching issue that wasn't in the details of the regulations, but this idea of coming up with some kind of mechanism to spread the cost of grid interconnections across a wider base than each project, because that is really a way that could be meaningful to broaden how developers can look at siting of these larger scale renewable projects. If there was a mechanism that could spread those costs, you could look beyond being very close to the appropriate wires and substations, and potentially site these on better locations that might be more palatable to the community in which they'll be sited. So just wanted to let you know that we put those comments out there, and I think there are many in the community who are submitting comments. It's an important topic right now. So that is it. I guess you all know about the changes in our staffing that's happening. And we are very, very thankful for our great staff that we have, and looking forward to recruiting new members of our staff who can serve the community well.
Thanks, Katie. Yeah, well, I sent you my sympathies.
Thank you.
You certainly presided over a rather tumultuous period in our DPS history. And thanks for your report on the ORES comments. I think that you made some really thoughtful comments, and it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. Does anybody have any questions for Katie? All right, I don't see any blue hands. So we're going to move along now to Barb's report on, Barb's report on outreach and education on reusable bags. Are you there, Barb?
Oh, Barb, you're muted.
Oh, goodness. I laugh because it's so funny how people do that, and then I do it too. It's so good that we can laugh at ourselves sometimes, right? So what we're going to talk about, and Jeremy's right here with me, and Nancy Webster is also here. We just want to give you a brief update. We tend to put a lot of communication plans together. And this one, of course, you've been very interested in what's going on. The focus of what we're trying to do, and I'll let Jeremy speak about his plan, is that we're really trying to move people away from paper bags to really encourage them to use less paper bags and more reusable bags. We'll also, Nancy Webster will give you a really brief update on what's going on with the low-income reusable bags, because there's progress being made there, and that will be it. I did want to tell you that the environmental procurement policy is not on your agenda today, and that's because when we finished it, shared it with Lisa Holmes, and then I went to Jason. Jason said that all is good. However, he wants to include it in the overall purchasing policy, which of course makes sense. So that's what they're working on now. We'll need a good chunk of time, like 15, 20 minutes minimum at the December peak meeting for the review of that draft policy. The plan is going to be for it to go to the department heads before that. So we certainly have been busy, and Nancy Webster has done quite a bit with that with Jesse at administration. So, but now on to the bags. So here's Jeremy.
Hey everybody, good to be here today. Yeah, so we laid out some goals in this communication plan that we would like to address in our outreach efforts. Those include promoting awareness that reusable bags are preferable to paper bags from both an environmental and a personal economic standpoint. So, you know, making the message that this not only prevents deforestation, but also saves you a little bit of cash. We want to promote awareness that reusable bags are safe to use. That's really important, especially now. But that they should also be cleaned regularly and how to do so. The Department of Health, the New York State Department of Health, provides recommendations that the DEC often links to. That just include, you know, making sure bags are clean and how often to wash them, things like that. We want to provide suggestions for how to consistently use reusable bags. And we also want to inform residents who are eligible that no cost reusable bags are available at some locations. And Nancy will be providing more info about that. The methods for how we want to do this include having a campaign slogan that focuses on that environmental and economic combination message. So the slogan we came up with was "Save some green, bring your own bags." And I'm kind of picturing a graphic of like a tree with dollar bills instead of leaves or something along those lines, but just, you know, hammering home that message that you'll save some money, you'll help the environment. Two-pronged approach there. We'll do press releases like we normally do. The timeline, by the way, let me just back it up. The timeline, I'm picturing that this would start in January, that we would really be doing these outreach efforts. So we do press releases, we would put that on the website, we would use information from the press releases in our social media efforts. One thing I'd like to do is to get in touch with grocery stores and see if we can actually combine our efforts a little bit in terms of social media. I'm not sure how much they'll be willing to do that, but I want to give it a shot. There's, of course, the bag distribution to low-income residents. Another thing is that we've put up bus placards in the TCAT buses, and we'd like to do that again. And the messaging for that might be more specifically about the availability of no-cost reusable bags. Another thing I'd just like to mention is that we did involve some students in doing the research for this communications project. We worked with a professor from Ithaca College, Susan Allen Gill, and two of her students, as well as a Dryden High School student who is an incoming freshman at Ithaca College that Susan Allen Gill has already sort of tapped her talents for. So they did some outreach and did some research and were sort of sounding boards for some of these ideas. And that's about all I have to say.
Yeah, so this is a typical example of our communications plan. And of course, we welcome your ideas, but we're going to be charging ahead. I think it would be good to email Jeremy and I if you have any thoughts or you'd like to make modifications in any way. But I felt really good about the student work. And I know Amanda, the EMC, has worked with Susan in the past. And it turns out she was a former swimmer like I'm a swimmer. And so we've gotten to be really good friends actually in the middle of all this. And just being able to see students and for them, and I think we'll have a continued relationship with them on anything we do with waste reduction and, you know, prevention and things like that. So what do you think?
I think it sounds great. Does anybody else have any input? Before we go on, I do want to thank Jeremy. I've noticed that you're very good at communicating to the legislators when there are issues or, you know, problems or just things we ought to know. And I've really appreciated that. You've done a great job.
Thanks, Deborah.
That makes me feel really happy because we think Jeremy is not only hardworking, but he's competent, he's young, and he's creative. And he's been with us for a couple of years, you know, and he was promoted when Jeff left. So what's great here is as I get older, I get to see these young people really establishing themselves. So thanks for that compliment for Jeremy.
Yeah, thank you. It's like you knew it was my birthday or something.
It is your birthday.
Is it your birthday?
It is, yeah. Just,
We'll do you a favor and not sing happy birthday.
Well, we're going
tried
to
singing happy birthday once and it was not pretty.
He gets a cake next week.
Okay.
Happy
That's,
birthday.
Mary, that's great. And then we have Nancy, who's just going to give you a really quick update on what's going on with the reusable bags with low-income residents.
Yeah, so part of the bag ban is, yes, I'm unmuted. Okay. Part of the bag ban is that we are charging 5 cents when anyone gets a paper bag at the grocery store. And that goes to New York State, and the New York State kicks back, I believe it's 40% to us, but with the stipulation that we have to use that money to buy reusable bags and distribute them to low-income people. They don't have a ton of guidance and parameters beyond that, but we work pretty closely with them. So we get updates and ask questions when needed. But we're working with DSS to come up with some different partnerships and locations, you know, Catholic charities, food pantries, different places where people are still going in person to get other services. And we're going to work on distributing the bags to those locations so that people can get bags and then hopefully rely less on the paper bags. We did a bunch of research, including, you know, my own testing, carrying around the reusable bags, filling them with groceries, washing them, doing all those things to make sure we're getting a quality product, because we don't want to be giving people something that's going to become trash. So we ended up with a nice Chico bag that folds in itself. It has a carabiner on it. It's something that myself and a lot of people in our office utilize. It's really easy. Yeah, look at Anna's. Yep, that's perfect. It's one of the few ones I can remember. I don't forget to bring them. They are attached.
Exactly. It works.
Yep, I keep at least one of my keys all the time. So at the very least, you always have one when you just run in for a couple things. Yeah, so we're gonna be able to distribute those. We're actually gonna incorporate it into our food scraps recycling route since we have a driver who's already out and about throughout the county regularly. So it'll be a seamless distribution, I think.
We are planning to get going sometime before the middle of December, okay, so that people will have those bags before the holiday season. And everything's gone very smoothly. Nancy did all the procurement, and we really appreciate Amanda and all the work that the EMC has done. We had a wonderful conversation with that committee, and they recognize that they support the steps because we went over all the steps that we were doing. And we're gonna be touching base, Amanda, with your committee, and we're gonna be able to like report out, you know, how that program is going, as well as, I think one thing, Jeremy, it would be really good if you could send the EMC Waste Reduction Committee your communications plan, so they might want to have some input into that plan. That's pretty much the size of it here. And I, again, want to just, you know, I'm really proud of Nancy. Nancy's doing all of our prevention work, our reduce work, and all of the grant work, which is a lot. We are getting a number of grants for education and various equipment. And Nancy's really a pro. And quite frankly, I know that, you know, Katie appreciates this too, but when you've got people on your staff that are experts at working with the state or the federal government and getting the money we need and communicating well and doing everything right, it's worth so much. And Nancy, you have just been so knowledgeable, and we're very happy about that. Another young person in the works here. So that's our report for today. Stay tuned to next month. And any other things that we wind up working on next year, any updates about waste prevention and waste reduction, we will be bringing to your committee.
Thanks, Barb.
Yep.
I will just say that as time goes by, the young people look younger and younger to me. Anyway, yeah, and thank you, Nancy, for your good work. Before I let Amanda ask her question, I do want to suggest that one place that you look at for distributing these bags is the Ithaca Free Clinic. When we visited them a couple years ago, they have a food distribution program.
That's a great, thank you. See, we don't know those things, and that's why it's so important that people share and provide input. We're not a department that wants to, exclude everybody. We want everybody to be included in this. And if we have any trouble with state aid, Anna Kelles, I know who to go to.
Yeah, we all have Anna's number now.
Oh, poor Anna.
I have questions from Amanda and Anna. So Amanda?
Yeah, I was just gonna say happy birthday, Jeremy. And thank you all for all your work on this. I know it's been a long ongoing process. Yeah, and I'm glad that you've connected with the EMC and the various folks there, because I know a lot of them are very invested. I actually
so much good work
going less, but yeah, and they're doing lots of great things. And Tom is leaving, so that's that's going to be hard. But I just had one question about how often we are going to get the funding from the state. Like, is it quarterly?
Yeah.
Or
I actually have reached out to Rick Snyder about two things. One is I need to know what New York State Department of Taxation and Finance needs for record keeping in terms of tracking the bags to assure them of how they're being used. And the second question that you're bringing up now is another one, which is, we've only received one check, and we've spent that, right, Nance? We've spent that on our bags. So, and we have a lot, but we don't know. So I'm going to have to rely on Rick. And I've been, as you know, busy with the procurement for the recycling center, but after December 1st, I will follow up more assertively to get the answers, and I'll report back. I'll send you guys an email about those questions.
great, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. Anna?
Yeah, I put the Chico bag website in the chat for everybody. FYI,
that's a good idea.
The sling one is the best. And the reason I put it in is because I'm trying to encourage people not to go to Amazon. They cut the cost to Chico, so people can avoid that. So I just thought I'd encourage people. But the other thing too, there's the emergency food, the Tompkins County Food Task Force. And they have been doing, it's a collective that has been doing a lot of work to reach people who are food insecure. And you can reach Holly Payne, who
I know Holly well, but Nancy, are you jotting that down? Yep. I forgot about that. Thank you.
So that would be a great way to do distribution, as well as the school system. I know that they are going to be switching back to doing deliveries over the holidays. And that's particularly with families who get free and reduced lunch.
Good.
So that is a way to identify people right away.
That's really good. I mean, we honestly, one of the things is we were struggling. This was my biggest struggle, trying to figure out how I can incorporate the implementation in our department, because it wasn't part of it. And really, I recognized that nobody else was going to be able to do it either. So, Nancy is going to be the person, overseeing that. And again, she'll do the best she can. And Robert, who does our food scrap drop-off collection and county collection, he's such a generous, fantastic guy. He came from Challenge Industries as a supervisor. And I really feel like we have the right team in place. I don't know what we would have done without that transportation model, but that is great. We will do that.
Yeah, Nancy, I was just thinking, and thank you, Barb,
Sure.
not reinventing the wheel. I know that they have been, because of the pandemic, really targeting identification of people who are food insecure. So,
You know, Anna, I'll also mention this to my Friday food policy. I'm on the Food Policy Council still, and I'll bring it up there. And I think that the truth of the matter is there should not be a shortfall in these bags, and they're not going to be identified. One of the things that Kit told us to do is switch colors with different orders so that they're not flagged. And there isn't going to be any logo or anything. And people are very happy about that.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, when we were doing the research for bags, we kind of talked about, do we want the county logo? Do we want this and that? And early on, we said, we don't want it to be a big stamp like, hi, I'm low income. But then to go a step further, Kit suggested changing up the color. I do want to add that we have this initial quantity of bags from that first check we got from New York State, but this is ongoing, right? Like,
yeah.
In theory, there's always going to be some plastic bag or paper bags out there.
Nance, how many bags do we have on hand before we start? 2,000.
Oh, and the last one I would mention is the Human Services Coalition 211.
Of that, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Thanks.
Yep. Also, there's like the mutual aid cabinets, and we have
Friendship Donation Network.
Yeah,
well, you know, Nancy, you have a background in social services, don't you? Where were you before you came to us?
I was at Family and Children's directly before, and at Racker Centers. So Family and Children's Service, especially there's the community outreach worker who's seeing people face to face still. So I'll pull back that memory.
So you're plugged in.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you everyone for your good ideas. Thank you, Barb and Nancy. And
you're so welcome. Thank you guys for coming. So many of you came to that facilities committee meeting with the legislature. I was really impressed with this committee's participation, and I was very grateful, and I look forward to the rest of the process starting next week.
Well, yeah, you're welcome, Barb. That's a can of worms we can't afford to open at this meeting.
No discussion.
Okay.
Right. Very good. Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you again. Before we try to fit in any discussion about anything else, Katrina, do we have to take any action on these advisory board appointments, or is this just an FYI?
No, the committee needs to approve them to go on to the legislature.
So let's do that now, because I see it's 3:23. So you've all seen these appointments. Could somebody move them, please? Dan moves, Amanda seconds. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? If not, are we ready to vote on these? I see head nods. So we will vote. Amanda.
Yes.
Anna.
Yes.
Dave.
Yes.
Dan.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So these pass unanimously. So we now have 6 big minutes to talk about the Green Workforce Development presentation. I want to start this off by thanking all of you who made a point to attend the HED meeting and listen to the report. I don't know if we want to get into this at this meeting or just save it for later. I know that there are issues that have to be taken back to the case board, and there may be changes. So does anybody have anything they want to talk about today, or do we want to just save this for the December meeting? Anna.
I would say that I just want to reassure people that Ellie is reaching out to IDA members. She's reaching out to Heather, or has reached out. She's reaching out to businesses, the green sector businesses. You know, she's volunteering all of her time to do this and has followed up on all of our points. So let's give her the time to do that, and we'll follow up.
That's a great idea. Anything else? Okay, then. Thank you, everybody. You've been very engaged these last couple of meetings with HED and all this good green fleet stuff. And I personally have been really excited. You also were very engaged in the F&I meeting. You know, we just have to stay on top of all this stuff. There's a lot of things happening, and even though we had a lot of downtime this year on this committee, I think things are really starting to pick up. So yay. Martha.
Thanks very much, Deborah. Just wanted to let people know there's a Climate Action Council meeting tomorrow at 2 o'clock, starting at 2. And then the public hearing on the Office of Renewable Energy Siting Regulations starts at 5. So in case you got nothing else to do because you're not having a Thanksgiving feast, those can keep you busy. And I can email the committee the links. So
Thanks. Okay, if that's everything, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Anna, second by Amanda. Everybody in favor, wave.
Bye, everyone.
All right, that's
Universal and
unanimous. Universal and unanimous. Thanks. Have a good day.
Happy
Bye.
Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
You too.
Take care.